Let's start with a quick recap. So week one, what did we discuss? So we're going to go through all six weeks of classes we've done so far, and I'd like to know what were some takeaways from each week that you got. So let's start with the first week. What did we discuss there?
So what people's needs are, what your message is, and what their needs are.
Okay.
I think that, if I recall, that was kind of where we started.
With number one. So week one, remember I said, let's not even get into the cadence of the words or giving these quick, pithy ideas on how to be better at presenting, so to speak. We just stepped back and said, what is your message? Remember I said a lot of people don't have a speaking problem, they have a messaging problem. So what's your message? That was week one. Like what is it that you were trying to say? You're going to see some of that. We're returning to that in week 7, picking that back up. What is the message? What do you want to say? What am I trying to get across? So that's week 1. Then week 2, we started getting into storytelling, week 2 and week 3. And we talked about the importance of telling a story, whether you're standing in front of a big group, whether it's a Zoom, whether you've been asked to give an impromptu speech or it's a business presentation. People understand stories better. They process information in stories better. So we talked about the power of a story. And we talked about in those 2 sessions, what all stories have is what? What are some key features that every great story consists of?
Relating to, no, don't worry.
No, you were right. Relation, connection.
Common experience.
Common experience. Yes, and even if you don't get the exact words that we said before, I know we might. Connection, common experience, and credibility. Connection, common experience, and credibility. That's really what makes every great story a great story. There's some level of connection. Somewhere, somehow, I'm able to connect. And that connection has to happen. It needs to happen quickly, and it happens deeply. We talked about that common experience, which is that as I'm talking, there's something that you can relate to. This goes beyond just a mere connection. This goes beyond, I was interested in what this person said, or it sounded nice. This is, I saw myself in their presentation. I heard myself in their story. Remember, we went over week 2, the story of the man who speaks from behind the lectern at the graduation about how he learned everything from a 3rd grade dropout. That was his theme. Connection, credibility, connection, common experience, and credibility. What is your credibility? What makes you able to tell the story and other people can't? Why can you tell the story and why should we listen to you? And then we talked about the power of the authenticity, the power of having a theme. So then we talked about those subtle things that push a story. There's a theme, there's passion, there's emotion. That's where that connection comes in. It's not just that I'm telling you a story again about something else that happened, but I'm deeply invested and I am transmitting that investment, that energy, that all of that is going into my presentation. Remember, we talked about the importance of pay attention to how you feel, because how you feel is what's going to come across. That leads us to week 4. 6 core areas of communication that we spoke about. So who wants to talk to us about the 6 core areas? We talked about 3 being nonverbal and then 3 being verbal.
For verbal, we had pitch, pace, and pause.
Absolutely.
And then just using that in your speech for effectiveness.
Yes.
And non-verbal, we had things like body language and dress.
Mm-hmm. And the 3rd one, another D. Who wants to help her out? 3 areas of core communication for nonverbal. You're almost there. Dress or apparel. Go ahead, Kirsten.
Demeanor.
Demeanor. So body language, which you said, and demeanor. And remember, in that week, we showed Jennifer Hudson, the singer, and how she's telling a story. And we talked about everything from what she wore to her body movements, to the sparkles on her dress, to the fact that she started by singing notes slowly at the beginning to create that suspense, and how the same way that a singer tells a story and the entertainer is telling the story is the same way that we're telling the story through those 6 areas. So first, verbal, pitch, pace, pause. How is my inflection and my up and down? My pace suggests to you how you should feel. It's not just the words. When I'm talking slower, it implies to you, listen to what I have to say. Whereas when I go quicker and I'm moving faster, your heart is speeding up. And there are ways, there's reasons for why I might do that. Maybe it is to rile you up, but being cognizant that that can have the opposite effect of maybe making you feel more anxious about what I'm saying. So we talked about knowing those, and then of course the power of an effective pause. Knowing how to use pauses to extract information, how to use pauses to reveal information and to uncover. And then that brought us to week 5, where we began to speak about how does now that storytelling manifests itself in selling and negotiation. And that's what we learned about persuasion, and how it's not so much what happens at the moment, which is persuasion, but it's what happens at the moment before the moment. Things that you can say to set up the scene. The imagery that matters, that the setting, the environment, all of those things matter, the way that I couch the experience. And we talked about how the way that a person tells a story that can translate into sales, that translates into that one-to-one interpersonal communication. Now, who remembers the 3 primary tactics that we discussed when we talked about effective communication strategies around negotiation and selling? What were the 3 tactics that we covered?
Just remember,
Marjorie?
no is not a no. I remember no was a boundary. No wasn't failure. I remember that.
Okay, so that was not one of the 3, but that was one of the strategies that I shared, that no is a bound. Actually, so that did relate to it. So I'll give you what we talked about then, objection handling. So we talked about how to handle objection. When somebody says, oh, no, that's not right, or that's too expensive, or I don't want to do that. How do I accept the objection, not dismiss it, show that I've understood it, and move on? The other tactic we discussed was mirroring. This can be done in sales. This can be done in everyday one-to-one communication. This is a tactic that's used, again, to uncover, to reveal. Remember, we watched the story of Chris Voss, the FBI former head negotiator, who showed how the same tactics that they use in law enforcement, or what they're using in negotiation, is what you can use in everyday life to be more persuasive. Objection handling, we talked about mirroring, and then we talked about the strategic use of questions to unveil, to uncover, to discover. And we talked about how that's not just for sales and negotiation. That's in an interview, which you're selling yourself. That's in a presentation. I have to know, this goes back to week 1. I'm not just going to get up and just start talking. I have to do a needs assessment. How do I do that? I need to ask questions. Last week, we came to persuasive speaking. So remember, we started with building this structure. How do you tell a story that can translate into any way you want to communicate? And we began by slowly bringing that into interpersonal communication, and then sales and negotiation. And then last week was persuasive speech. How does this show up if you are in like this, and we're talking and it's a small group of people, or it's a business presentation, or you're being told that you have to give some sort of persuasive correspondence? How do you do that? And we talked about last week ways to be more persuasive, be more concise, have a structure, have an outline, be clear on what you want to say, practice it, know what the audience is. We talked about all these little things that one can do, as well as how to set up the structure, bullet points, give people an outline of where you're going, frame the conversation, use alliteration. People like the rule of 3. People like when they can follow along with exactly what you're saying. All of these things help your audience to stay on track, help you to stay on track, and help you to deliver the message more concisely and more compelling. All of that brings us back squarely to the very beginning point, which is where I want to bring all this back together. All of the tactics, all of the strategies that I showed, all of the little things of ways that you can kind of tweak to be more effective, to be heard better. Let's bring all of that back and go back to this foundation of what is the message. I'm going to show you several videos today, and I want to get back to, do you know your message? If you know your message, you can communicate it clearly. I don't want us to get lost in all of the tactics. I don't want us to get lost in the rule of three and alliteration, because all of that is secondary to how do I respond, not react. That's what we're going to talk about today. Respond to an invitation to speak. How do I assess the situation, and how do I stand up and deliver effectively and clearly in any circumstance? And I want to talk today about two types of speaking. We're going to talk about prepared and planned speaking. So that could be these keynotes. You're asked to give a large presentation, a speech. But then that's, Rahima, that's you, right? Week 2, when you were asked to share what you were asked to share. That's an example of that. That's prepared. You had time to plan. But then I want us to talk about today, spontaneous speaking. That's what scares people the most. How do you be prepared if you're called to give a toast, to give an introduction? You're in the middle of a business meeting. They say, you know what? I think Kirsten did a better job at doing this project than I did. Why don't you take us away and tell us? Now you're on the spot. What do you say? I didn't want to just use this time. I know we only have this last session. I thought about, we can use an entire hour to talk about these big, grand public speeches. But I thought, I don't know if that's the best use of our time. I want to give a piece of that, because the truth of the matter is, in everyday speaking, it's the spontaneous speaking that we're more or less asked to do. That's what gets us riled up. And I want to talk to you about, how do you talk off the cuff, but look prepared and be prepared? And I believe if you get that, then, you know, some of the other pieces. And then this is going to go back to that question of, how do I not be nervous? Well, I'm going to show you some ways to remove some of that anxiety, because from the very beginning, you're giving yourself the best tools to be able to speak. And it's fun. And it's fun. So this is a good way to end this session, these 7 weeks, because we're bringing it all back together. All right. I want to watch 3 powerful videos, and then we're going to get straight into questions. Actually, we're going to do 2 videos. One is a prepared speech. We're going to watch this speech. This is planned. This is, remember we talked about, okay, what does a planned speech look like? He was asked to give a speech on a topic, and now this person is coming and delivering. So we're gonna watch that. Then we're gonna watch like a hybrid. This is not totally unprepared, but it is not totally prepared either. I want us to watch a clip of an actor accepting an award. So you would imagine this person has in their mind something that they might want to say if they win, not knowing if they will win. Then they win. Of course, there's the nerves and all of that. So they have something prepared, but here this person has made a speech that, you know, made a lot of impact around the world. But I want you to see what it looks like when you maybe have something in your mind, but then you get up there and you deliver it. And then the third thing will be total off the cuff speaking and what people do in those type of situations. All right. So how does that sound? Sound good?
Yep.
Okay, let's get right to it. Let's go to...
My mom would be at all my sporting events. Let's say I was playing football, okay? My mother would be on the sidelines, and if the play on the field started going one way, my mother would run along like, Mark, get him, get him! I'd be like, oh my gosh. I'd get in the huddle with the other guys. They go, Mark, is that your mother? I go, no, I never saw her before in my life. The greatest gift my mother ever gave me, she believed in me. I have overdosed on drugs on 3 occasions where I should have been dead. But I believe I was kept here for a reason. You show me your friends, I will show you your future. How do I know this? I hung out with losers, and I became the biggest loser of them all because I gave up everything I dreamt about as a little boy because of who I chose to surround myself with. My friends would drive me home at 2, 3, 4 in the morning. We'd be drunk and high, laughing in the car. We'd pull up in front of my house in New York. They go, Mark, The light's on. I go, oh man, my mother's up. See, my mom wouldn't go to bed until she knew her son was still alive. I'd walk in, she'd say, hi, Mark, how was your night? I go, it was good, Mom, I'm just gonna go to bed. She goes, can I talk to you for a minute? I go, Mom, I'm tired, I'm just gonna go to bed. She goes, Mark, I haven't seen you all day and all night. Can I please talk to you? I said, man, just leave me alone. You bug me. I'd slam my bedroom door on the one person who believed in me. I was on a worldwide tour and we were wrestling overseas in Japan. After my wrestling match, I went upstairs in my hotel room and I fell asleep. There was a knock at my door at 3 o'clock in the morning. I got out of bed and I looked through the safety window and I could see it was a Japanese promoter. So I opened the door and he said, Mark, you need to call home. There's been an emergency. I went and got on the hotel room phone. I called back to the United States and said, hey, what's going on? They said, Mark, I don't know how to tell you this. I said, just tell me what happened. I suddenly started crying. They go, Mark, I can't tell you. I said, just say it. They said, Mark, your mother died. I just threw the phone down. I ran out of my hotel room. I took the elevator to the lobby, and when the doors opened up, I just ran out into the street. I mean, there was no cars, there was no people. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. And I walked down the middle of a street in Hiroshima, Japan, and I remember looking up and just saying, Mom, I am so sorry. I flew home for her funeral, and I was so nervous to walk up to her casket, so I just stood way in the back. And I kept looking from a distance. I kept thinking to myself, Mom, please wake up. Please get up. And then I finally got the nerve to walk up to her. And as I got closer, I could see my mom for the first time. I mean, she was so beautiful. She was dressed in white. I mean, she looked like an angel. And I just stood over and I said, Mom, you are my hero. Everything I am, everything I hope to be was because of you. You loved me so much. You gave me a life. You're the only one that ever believed in me. How did I repay her? By getting drunk, by getting high, by getting stupid, by hanging out with losers. For what? All she ever wanted to do was talk to me. I wish I could talk to you now, Mom. I wish you could see what I'm doing. Why couldn't I have been a better son? We are defined by our choices. But if you surround yourself with people involved in drugs and alcohol and pills, it's a dead end. I'm not here to preach to you. I'm here to tell you I lived that life. It leads to broken hearts, broken relationships, broken dreams, and death. For what? To get high? If you have a mother or a father, when you go home, tell them how much you love them. See, my whole life was about being rich and famous. I had to be a millionaire. I had to win the race. I had to win the race at the expense of my marriage, my family, my friends. For what? To be all alone in the world? I learned what is truly important, and that is how precious this gift of life is, and our families, and how quickly it can be taken away. See, I no longer live in time, I live in moments. See, it's not what's in your pocket that matters, it's what's in your heart that truly matters. Love is just a word until somebody comes along and gives it meaning. You're the meaning.
Incredible, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yes,
so
with me.
sad.
Incredible. Hold on to that. We're going to talk about it, but I want you to see this right behind it. This one's a little shorter, 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. I'm particularly proud and happy about the young filmmakers, actors, singers, writers, producers, that are coming up behind my generation. In particular, Barry Jenkins. Young people understand this young man made 10, 15, 20 short films before he got the opportunity to make Moonlight. So never give up. Without commitment, you'll never start. But more importantly, without consistency, you'll never finish. It's not easy. If it was easy, there'd be no Kerry Washington. If it was easy, there'd be no Taraji Henson, P. Henson. If it were easy, there'd be no Octavia Spencer. But not only that, if it were easy, there'd be no Viola Davis. If it were easy, there'd be no Michael T. Williamson, no Stephen McKinley Henderson, no Russell Hornsby. If it were easy, there'd be no Denzel Washington. So keep working, keep striving, never give up, fall down 7 times, get up 8. Ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship. Ease is a greater threat to progress than hardship. So keep moving, keep growing, keep learning. See you at work.
Okay, all right. Give me a second. Let me just shut this off. All right. So just from a second, is it possible to watch that and not feel better? I mean, I don't care what you're going through. You may not walk away happy, but do you not feel a little better about yourself, your situation, your life, something than you did 10 minutes ago?
Yes.
We're going to talk about this, but I want to just kind of just stop and just pay attention to how you feel. Pay attention to how you felt when they talked. Listen, they're not the only people that accepted awards, that gave speeches. This happens millions of times every day. But the great communicators say something that sticks with you and it moves you and it changes you. The secret to great speaking, what do you want to say? What made Denzel, and I don't know the other gentleman's name, I need to find it out, but the first one, I mean, I like cried when I've cried the first time and the second time I saw it. The third time, it was just a tear that came out, I didn't boo-hoo. So I'm getting better. But it was so transformative. That's what I wanted to show those. They had something to say. If you don't have nothing to say, and I know it's not grammatically correct, but I'm gonna say it again. If you don't have nothing to say, sit down. The problem is you have a lot of people that give these talks and they really don't have anything to say because they're talking, but they're not adding anything new to this space. So the first question you really have to ask yourself, remember we talked about, I think it was 2 weeks ago, writing at the top of the paper. Actually, I think it was last week. I want my audience to do this after I speak. That helps us to frame, even when I write that down, what is my intention? Remember we kept about intentionality. So I want you to ask yourself, okay, it's past 6 weeks, I've been sharing all these things, but let's step back. The first thing you have to ask yourself when you get ready to speak is, what do I want to say? So let me ask you this. Let's talk with the first person. What did he say? Clearly he said a lot, and there's no way you're going to regurgitate 8 minutes of words. But he had a message. If you had to put his message into your own words, what's that message? What was he attempting to convey?
I was trying to say that the people that you associate yourself with end up being a reflection of who you are as a person, and that if you are led astray by people, then you will find yourself in a position where you don't really appreciate what you have and what's around you.
Okay.
Kind of to become that, and he canvassed it within a personal story of development about his mother and his drug addiction.
Okay, what did you get from it, Rahima?
Well, I think his most important message was at the end, where he said that you have to live in the moment and that the most important thing is love, which you get from the people around you, the people that are important to you. So pay attention to it. Don't take it for granted because it might not always be there.
Lishay?
Yeah, I'm with Rahima. I mean, for me, the message was live in the moment. It's not about time, it's about the moments.
Okay. So notice everybody got something slightly different, but it's still around that core, that feel-good message. Remember we talked about last week the importance of what do I want to say and how do I need to make my audience feel? Remember that? Write that down again. It's the feeling. So even if I walked away with thinking, well, it's more about hug people tight than it is about bad choices, I still walk away with that feel-good message. Even if I walk away with saying it's more about not making bad choices than it is with, reuniting with family, still I walk because I felt a certain way. I think what I really want to get across is more than anything, more than all of the tactics, and yes, we can point to different tactics that they're using, and we've done this already, whether it's alliteration, whether it's pause, whether it's the speeding up of his words, how he got, I'm talking about the first speech now, the slow of his pace to let you know, listen to what I'm saying. All of that is ancillary and secondary to the foundational piece, which is, what do you have to say? He had a powerful message. But the second thing that ties both of those together, both him and Denzel, they both had something that they wanted to say, and they were able to clearly show emotion. This is key. I was trying to, a week into this, maybe 2 weeks, explain what it means when I say that the audience breaks. Remember, I kind of used that word, and I didn't know, I was trying to play around with this, use my words to explain what's embedded in my mind. And we were talking about Jennifer Hudson in particular, and that moment where she sings in the climax, that you can feel the room change. And I talked about how every speech, every presentation, every time you speak, what you're looking for is that moment. This is what I want you to hear right now. You're looking for that moment where the room breaks. So when I talk about the room breaking, what I mean is it's that moment of vulnerability. Let's take the first guy. He's practically crying on stage. It's a deeply vulnerable, I feel like I see into his soul. He didn't just talk to me about the story. That would have been one level. He could have done that. Two, he could have said, oh, my mother died. But for him to go there, and I feel the authenticity of it. I feel it. When he said, and this is the thing, he slowed down. Denzel did the same thing. When you get your audience to that moment, live in it. No pun intended. I know he talked about living in that moment, but now it's about that moment that the audience is completely in what he's saying. First of all, when he said his mom died, notice how you even saw, I know some of that is editing, but you saw how people's attention sparked up. So that's the first thing. There's a moment when you speak, when you know that you said something that's different. We live in a world now where it's so much information, it's so much content. So this goes back to, what are you going to say? What are you going to say that's different? If it's going to be the same old, this is what I tell people, like here in America, the same old, I grew up poor, I had to pull myself up by my own bootstraps. We've heard that a million times. So what are you going to add that's different? So if you're asked to give a speech or speaking on your personal life, and you have something unique if it's about that, right? But what is it? What am I going to say? They had something very powerful that they wanted to say. And because they were not afraid to be vulnerable, to be emotional and be open, the audience lived in that space with them. And when he said in the beginning, the first guy, when he got to the point, first he talked about his mother dying, it's quiet. Mind you, his pace slows, everybody's listening. This is what you want. Then he says something powerful. He begins to talk to his mother. All I need, Mom, is you. He could have lived there for 5-10 minutes and the audience would have stayed there. Because now it's beyond him talking to me. It's beyond me hearing the story. I am getting a glimpse into his pain, into his life, into his story, and he's bringing us there. He's transmitting us. That's what great communicators do. He's telling the story in the present tense. Catch that. He's not telling us just, well, it happened ago. He's there. He starts with the past, but then he weaves it to the present. This is key when you're telling a story because you're slowing it down. People go with stories. They listen to stories. They follow it. And now as he begins to unravel, he's certainly got common experience. He's certainly got connection. And he's there with his audience. When Denzel begins to point out people in the audience, they're living in that moment. They're enjoying the moment. When you get up to speak, and I hope I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because I wanted to give this tip about not seeing it as a challenge. Most people, whether it's prepared or planned, I want to go back to the question of how not to be anxious. Most people see it as a challenge. They see speaking as already this thing that they don't want to do. It's an obstacle. It's oh my gosh, don't pick me. I don't want to do it. So their orientation is already to be threatened. You know how we do when we're threatened as humans. We're not open. We're not communicative. We're not emotive. And so the key to relaxing some of that nervousness and all of that is to see it as an opportunity. Somebody wants to hear what you say. That's exciting. They're interested. They're listening. They may not listen long, not in the days of Zoom where everybody's doing 2 things on every conference call. You may not have long, but you've got a moment to say something. And what the heck are you going to say? And if you don't have anything to say, then sit down and shut up and just be, but if you have something to say, then let's talk about it. Denzel wanted to tell that audience, this isn't just about me. It's not about you. It's everybody that's coming after us. It's for all of the people that are watching, all of the young people who never thought that they could get a shot. They too can do it. We heard him talk about persistence. Barry Jenkins went 15 times, 20 times before he finally got the groundbreaking Moonlight role. Everybody can relate to that. Even if you don't know who Barry Jenkins is, even if you never watched Moonlight, you know what it's like to persist and to fail and to get back up. So he knew in his mind, that's what I want to talk about. He had in his mind something, and because he had something powerful to say, it comes across. So what's my message? What do I want to say? Before we get into me showing you spontaneous speaking, I want to shift now into, because this is going to help directly shift into, how do I get prepared for unplanned speaking? It sounds, like an oxymoron. How do I plan to be unprepared, all right? So let's talk about that. Great communicators, one, they see every opportunity to speak as an opportunity, not a challenge. That's the first thing. So let's talk about some examples, and I'm just looking through my notes, of spontaneous speaking. This is give an introduction. You might have to stand up and give feedback in the middle of a room because of something. I mean, just off the cuff. You might be asked to give an on-the-spot presentation, question and answer session. Maybe someone else is doing it and they say, hey, this is the better person to answer it. There's a toast. All of these things immediately can heighten. So let's take it to this. Let's take it to, you're sitting in a room, there's 50 people, maybe you're at your job, and the supervisor, or let's say the CEO let's say it's the CEO giving a presentation, and they're giving a presentation, and part of it is on your division. And the CEO stops and says, you know what? This is actually your division. I think you do a better job. Why don't you stand up and talk to us about what has been happening for the past 4 months? Now pause for 1 second. That's something that will cause somebody to have a daggone heart attack if you're not careful. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
What do I say? Don't pick me. Why? One, because they've already probably put in their mind that it's a challenge. As hard as it might be for you, I want you, whenever you're about to speak, it's an opportunity. It's not a challenge. It's not a challenge. Because guess what? You don't have to say anything. If you really want to feel like you're taking the power back, you don't have to say anything, even if it is a supervisor. I appreciate you calling me. I don't think I'm prepared, right? Probably wouldn't be advisable, but it's not a life or death situation. So you don't speak under duress. You know? Because it comes across like I watch some people speak and I'm like, blink twice if you are doing this against your will, because I don't. So the first thing I want you to do is slow down, right? Because I'm giving tips now for spontaneous. Let's slow down. Let's be great. Okay, they want me to say something. What do I want to say? Let me take a moment. Everything I'm about to tell you, I have done the opposite before and it came out horribly. That's how I've learned not to do it that way. I don't want you to think I just mastered this. The worst thing you can do is they ask you to speak, you get up and you just start talking. I've done that before because I haven't gathered my thoughts. No, I need a moment. You always have a moment. Even if it's on the spot, it's a moment. I can't just start talking because I'm rambling, you know I'm rambling, and it's not right. And then because I'm nervous, that only heightens the nervousness. So the first thing I want you to do is to slow down. I want you to see it as an opportunity, and I want you to create your own space. Write that down. Create your space. What does that look like for you? Maybe you take a moment. Maybe you drink a glass of water. Maybe you say, you know what, I need to stand up because it's better for me to stand up if I share this presentation. Maybe you start off, okay, so I'm on the spot. Everybody laughs now. Everybody knows you're on the spot too. You're not the only one. Okay, let me see what I can do. You start where you are. Infuse humor, infuse your personality. Be natural though, but slow it down. Don't just, because I've done this before. I just start talking and then I'm like, you know, it's almost the best analogy I can give. You know, it's almost like jumping in the middle of a pool in the deep end, and then you're halfway out there. And how the heck did I get out? Now I'm too far out that if I stop, I'm gonna drown. And that's what happens when you just start talking. So I'm slowing it down. Let me give you another tip that a lot of people don't do when they get up to prepare. Excuse me, when they get up to speak spontaneous. I want to respond. I don't want to react. How do I do it? I want to listen to what is happening, what I'm being asked. That's why I have to stop. I've got to take a moment to feel what's going on. That's where that pause is important. So I want to slow it down and I want to respond. So let's go back to the CEO, because this is a very plausible example. And giving in the middle of a presentation, you know, hey, why don't you stand up? You run that division. Why don't you tell us what's been happening? Okay, so immediate notion is fright. I mean, that's natural. Oh my gosh, my job might daggone be on the line. It's not just me giving a bad presentation. My whole job might be on the line. And I just moved into another house. And Lord knows if I lose that, it's all this going through your mind, all right? So the first thing I want you to do is stop. This is an opportunity. He wouldn't or she wouldn't, as a CEO, have picked you if they didn't think you were able. Even though it might seem like a setup, 9 times out of 10, it's not. They're not trying to look bad either. They have faith that you can perform. Actually, I don't want to use that word because that's something I want to say. You're not performing. That you can rise to the occasion. So I want you to know that. I want you to slow down. I want you to take your moment. I want you to hear what's being said, and then I want to respond. It's okay if I need to ask a clarifying question. Doggone, you just called me out in the middle of this thing. So, okay, well, thank you for calling me. I'm standing up. Do you want me to go through everything we've done for the past couple months? It's fine to do that because you need to get, and then even as you're asking questions, right? Let's take that interchange. That will make you feel more comfortable even in that back and forth because you're not standing up. Because think about it, part of the issue with spontaneous speaking is that it's part doubt. Am I even saying what I'm supposed to say? So take the CEO that says, or supervisor, stand up and tell us, you might be thinking, am I even saying what I want supposed to say? Well, if you're not sure, ask questions. You see how easy that is? Slow it down. Remember, I told you this about negotiations. Slow it down. Make it comfortable for you. When you feel uncomfortable, it's going to come off as uncomfortable. So let's go to I think it was Rahima. You said to me about a month ago, was it? I think it was, and I can't remember the question, but I made a point that if you don't know what you're talking about, stop rambling and catch yourself because everybody's going to know and it's going to look bad. And I had that thing actually happen. So I told you I have a business sales development consulting position. And we're in the middle of this business meeting, and it's all of they had companies from outside the company. We're all on this huge Zoom. And I'm the youngest person on this call. I don't know why they called me, all these seasoned reps. And they said, you know what? We want to use you as the prototype. That's what they said. Now, mind you, my senior VP is there with this consulting group from the outside. And they're like, we've heard that you're a good speaker, so we're going to have you play out this role. I'm calling you. And now, not just in the middle of the Zoom call, I'm calling you. I'm a reporter, and you're who you are at the company. And we're going to do this mock interview. I'm sitting here when they first said, I'm thinking, why in the world are you picking me? I don't even, what, huh? And I remember, but I went with it. And I literally thought of you, Rahima, because 2 minutes into it as I'm talking, I didn't know I just didn't know. I wasn't clear on, because we're doing this role play. That was my first, I knew the company I consult with, but that woman, I had never heard of their company. I didn't know what a proper report expert interview was. And you know what I did? I stopped in the middle. I said, I don't know what I'm doing. First, what happened was it was awkward. The VP stood up and said, yeah, it's no way that you would know what you're doing. Then people started writing me on the Zoom in the chat, thank you for saying something, because I was so uncomfortable she was going to pick me. And I just wanted to share that story because I thought of you, Rahima, because that's the authenticity. Yes, I'm a great speaker, I feel like, and all that. I just had to stop and say, I don't know what I'm doing. Lady, I don't even know you, and I'm not, you picked me. But once I was able to get out of that, that helped me a lot. All right. So let me give some other tips. I want to give you the biggest tip to not be nervous. I'm gonna give you the biggest tip right here. If you missed everything else I said, excuse me, for 6 weeks and 2 hours, and you only caught this last 30 minutes, this is worth it here. How to not be as nervous. Let me tell you right here. Get out of your own way. Get out of your own head. As much as you can, I want you to be aware of this. Hold on, excuse me, my throat. Self-consciousness is the opposite of the place that you need to be at to live in that moment where you can deliver for the audience. I want you to keep that in mind. So what makes a person nervous, excuse me, are two things. One, they're worried about the future, not the present. So let's go back to how do I not be as nervous? Stay in the moment. Because when you really think about what you're nervous about, let me go back to the theoretical case I gave the CEO saying something, and even specifically in my case when I was called out. The nervousness is, well, if I don't do well, what is the VP going to think later? It's not about the moment now. Think about it. When you get nervous, the next time you get nervous, question yourself, am I nervous about this moment? Or is it something else afterwards? So if you know it's something else afterwards, which it always is, get out of that. Get in this moment. Great communicators are in the moment. See, I can't be vulnerable if I'm self-conscious. You see all that? So some of the things that some public speakers teach, which I think you have to be careful with, get in the mirror, look how you speak, practice, look at yourself. Yeah, all of that could be nice, but I'm gonna tell you the bad side of that. If you're not careful, you get too self-conscious. If you focus on yourself more, this is the irony, you will never give as good of a presentation. Great communicators understand, let's go back to week one, they are the vessel. It is something powerfully being transmitted through them, not from them. And so to really capture that, you've got to figure out how to get out of your own way. When you're a really good communicator, you will say things and then sit down and be like, and I've done this, did I really share that? But it's because you were in that moment. That's when you know everything disappears. Your audience is there. You're there. This happens even in spontaneous speaking. Trust me, when you can get to that, what is that moment? So the more nervous I am, remember I showed you the video of that pastor, T.D. Jakes, and he talked about when his hands would shake so bad, but he said he would put the mic in front of him. He didn't stop speaking. You know, as he brought that point out, he said, but then after 10 minutes, he could grab it because his words were, when the anointing falls, the fear goes. but it's truth to when you get out of your own way. When you think about it, the reason why a person may not get up and tell a story and cry in front of the audience is because of what? What people might say. They might laugh. It might make them feel bad. All of those things, but all of those things prevent them from being good speakers because they're too self-conscious. All of your insecurities, if you're not, and we all have insecurities. I don't care who you are. We all have insecurity. We all have things, but to be a really effective communicator, you've got to come to the place where I can forget some of that. I've got to go back to the P. Diddy clip that I showed you of making the band. Remember week 1, where he said, you got to get butt naked. Not literally, but you remember the clip. He says, get raw, get emotional. Because remember, he said, you're too prepared. When they sung, your hands are too right and your work. He said, you're not blacking out. What he was really saying is you're not in that moment. When you get to that moment, your audience will follow you. Okay, so let's keep going with it. Spontaneous speaking. How do I look prepared, even if I'm not? Every great communicator speak in a cadence. Think about this. They have a structure. So even if I'm called immediately, I'm gonna give you 2 structures that you can always go to. First structure, problem, solution, benefit. Write that down. That can always happen. So, all right, let me step back for a second. I'm gonna listen and I'm gonna respond with a story. Whether it's a toast, I'm responding with a story. If the CEO has called me up, I'm responding with a story. Well, I remember, and maybe the story isn't when I joined the company 20 years ago. I'm not saying that, but people process stories better. So even if the story is the project we just started working with a month ago was this, and we were able to double our revenue in the last 3 months. I want to respond with a story. Okay, so I'm listening. What do they want me to say? I'm responding with a story. And when I respond with that story, I want to make sure that I have a ready structure in place. When I have a ready structure in place, it looks like I'm talking off the cuff. And I mean, in some cases I am, but I have a structure. I already have problem. That's one example. Problem, let's say solution, benefit. So this is an example of maybe you're sitting and you're giving an interview like for a news outlet or maybe it's a question and answer. And business people maybe would probably use this a bit more in those. This is the problem. This is the benefit. This is the solution. Another way to do it is what, why it's important, and how it works. These are just examples. I'm giving examples of not stories, but frameworks for stories. Because effective communicators, they are not just telling a story, but they have a structure. So it's good to tell a story, but if the story goes on and on, you're gonna lose me. So what's the structure? So if I always have a structure in place, my favorite structure is to have a quote. I love to have a ready quote. I love to have a pithy, some type of analogy. If I have that, whether it's a toast or whether it's in the middle of a classroom, I'm on, because I know I'm veering right back there. It's a cadence to my speak, it's a rhythm to my speak, and I have a framework. Check out next time you see people when they're called to speak, they are, even if that, again, the information and the content is changing, there's a structure in place. People follow structures better. Is this making sense what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Okay, because really what I want to show is the way that people who are, I don't want to say they're unprepared because they are prepared, because they may not have prepared for that specific engagement, but they have prepared to deliver their message. And once you're prepared to deliver your message, that's good. I never thought of that distinction until I said it this way. It's a difference between preparing for your speech and preparing for your message. That's the point. You may not have prepared for the engagement or the speech, but if you've prepared for the message, if I know what's on my heart is women empowerment, I need to have always a ready story. What's that story that I go back to? What's the one story that I know every time when I tell it about women empowerment, it gets the audience's attention? That's what you want to lead with. Pay attention to how people listen to the stories you told. Now, maybe you need to tell it better, or maybe it's a story you just need to get rid of. But you have the story, you have the structure, you have those things. So now you're able to better navigate a so-called unplanned situation. So have a structure. We are talking about living in that moment. Get out of your own way. And now I want to give an acronym called BRIEF. I've heard this from someone else, but I thought this was great. So it's an acronym called BRIEF. And then I want to talk about the power of engagement. So BRIEF, acronym. First, believe. Believe what you're saying. This is bringing this all back together. We've all been in a situation where you've given a presentation and you were handed notes from someone else to give that presentation. Usually it's a disaster. And why is that?
Someone else's words.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard for me
You're
to
not
believe.
feeling it.
There you go.
It's not your story.
It's not my story. I've got to customize. And I don't think I used that word yet in this session. Remember I talked about before slowing down, hearing. I want you to write that word customize. I've got to customize. I did talk about creating the environment. I've got to create an environment and I've got to believe this. Check yourself. Ask yourself, do I believe what I'm saying? And there's different levels of belief. I mean, you have interest, you have belief, and then you have core conviction. And when you're speaking on something you're interested in, it never comes across the same way as when you speak about something that there's a core conviction. Because that comes from the depth of you, and that's what connects with people. So believe what you're saying. Secondly, rehearse, breathe, rehearse. So maybe I can't rehearse for the engagement. I mean, to give a quick toast, right? But I can rehearse. What is my message? What is my story? What do I want to say? That's the question I always want to be asking. If I'm passionate about women empowerment, if I'm passionate about democracy matters, if I'm passionate about my country, what are the stories, the anecdotes, the things that I wish everybody knew? What do I know that they don't know? And this is my opportunity to say that. So rehearse it. Because what rehearsing allows me to do is, how does it sound? How do I feel saying it? And maybe I should say it this way instead of that way. Interesting. What am I saying that's interesting and that's different? I finally got to the place because somebody said, well, when are you writing another book? I said, when I have something different to say. There's so much content. There's so many books. There's so much YouTube. I just don't think it's worth saying what everybody else is saying. And whenever you get up to speak, I think you really want to ask yourself, what am I saying that no one else is? I watched this presentation by Buzz Aldrin, and I really thought it was interesting. And he talked about how he and Lance Armstrong were, actually, no. It was about Buzz Aldrin, not him himself. But they were talking about him and not Lance Armstrong. Who's the guy that went to the moon?
Neil Armstrong.
That's bad. Okay, see, okay. Y'all don't tell people I did not remember his name. But he was making the point that two people went to the moon. One person never spoke about it, but Neil, but Buzz went around for the rest of his life giving these speeches and all of that. And he said that he feels like, and Buzz Aldrin toward the end of his life later said, he felt an obligation. I went to the moon and 7 billion people in the world never did. I got to see something no one else did, and I felt I had a responsibility to share. I'm telling this story because when you have something powerful that you want to share, either that you've seen, that other people have it, a perspective that you feel like other people that don't have, those are the things that make people sit up straight. That goes back to the question, what do I want to say? Those are the things I want to, the things that make people sit up, the things that people make say, the things that people raise their eyebrows, the things that people you don't hear often, that's what's worth saying. So what do I want to say? I want to have a ready structure, and then I want to deliver. Okay, so interesting. What am I saying is interesting? The E is edit. Make sure that what you're saying, the more you rehearse, cut off the fat. Good communicators leave you with what you need, and the rest, is not there. If I have 1,000 words, I want to communicate 1, 2 ideas. I don't want to use 1,000 words to communicate 1,000 ideas. When you rehearse, when you have a theme, when you're focused, it comes across like I know what I'm talking about. And that's more persuasive. And that reduces your nervousness because I have a structure that even if I get pulled away, let's go back to that structure, I can come back to it. Even if I get far off because I get drawn away by maybe I'm in the middle of this, go back to the presentation that the CEO maybe has asked this person to give. Maybe in the middle of talking, standing up, they realize they're getting side eyes from the coworkers, or maybe one of their supervisors looking like, what the heck are you talking about? Okay, I can always reorient myself because I know my framework. If it's problem, solution, benefit, I go back solution, maybe because that's where I left off. If it's why or what the product is or what it is we're doing, why we're doing it and how, I have that structure. If it's story, give a quick analogy, give the quote, and then the takeaway, I have that in my mind, the framework. So I'm not lost. That's the point. I don't want you to be lost up there speaking and you just, I have something that I can return to. And finally, F, have fun. It's not a challenge. I mean, it is a challenge in the best way that it can heighten your ability to deliver, but don't go into it. You know, people, it amazes me how many people are more scared, you know, the fear of public speaking. And I still don't think I believe this. People that say that they rate that higher than death. I mean, what would be higher than death? I mean, you know, would you rather be put on a guillotine or give a public speech? I don't even think that would be a. But I think the reason, I think of what Mark Twain said. Mark Twain, you know, he's always pithy with his words. He said, I've been through some really bad things in my life, and some of them actually happened. And what he was saying is, I'll say it again, I've been through some really bad things in my life, and some of them actually happened. He talked about the power of fear, that you can put yourself through something that never really actually transpires. And that's what happens. You're given the invitation, I don't say you, the person is given the invitation to speak either a week in advance or right there in the moment. And immediately their mind goes to fight or flight, challenge, I hate this. And that completely orients the way that they have fun. People are looking, they're listening. And the best thing is when you're speaking and you see people listening, you can, look, and I want to tell you this, you're never talking to everybody. This is important for Zoom, where you might see some people are distracted or you're in a big room and something. It's never everybody. I don't care who it is that we point to as being a great speaker, right? There's going to be at least 1 billion people that's going to say that person doesn't do it for me. That's life. It's don't take it personal, but there's somebody in the room that wants to hear what you said. And there's somebody in the room that probably didn't want to hear you at first, but if you do it right, now they want to listen. I can't tell you how many times when I would walk into, whether it was a detention center or whether it was in a prison, I'm in the suit and I say, no, I know what that's like. And I might throw something and now their mind is shifted off because they thought they knew my whole story because of the way I dress and I talk. That goes back to those sit-up moments. What can you say that jiggers the audience off of, this is what I think I'm going to hear, another polite, kind talk or toast or whatever, and it jigs them off, and now, oh my gosh, I didn't know that's what you were going to say. Maybe that's a joke. Maybe it's just something that I say. Maybe it's a prop. I don't know. But the having fun, because that comes across. Lastly, engage. Engage. I really wanted to. If we had another week, we would have done just a whole week on, like I wanted to show you the Martin Luther Kings and the John Kennedys. I didn't do those speeches because I didn't know if it would have as much value for, I'm like, let's just focus on that everyday sort of thing that people, but if we were to get into that, I would show you the same way that I've tried to engage you on this Zoom, the same way, and it's 6 people, the same way that a person, you might engage someone if you see them and you just, hey, what's your name? You want to talk to them? The great communicators, even when it's 1 million people, they're engaging the same way. One, they're having a conversation. They're not talking above the crowd, they're talking to. That guy, when he's talking about his mother, I felt like he was talking to me, and I'm not even in the room. I'm on the YouTube crying. That's a great communicator. They're able to engage you. They can ask, how do you do it? This goes back to reducing some of your nervousness. Ask a question in the beginning. Say something that gets the audience involved. Involve them. Don't just come out and start talking. I do this. I've had, let's take churches where they say, you know what, we got this powerful brother. Darrell, come up and say something. Now, I might already have in my mind what I want to say, problem, solution, I might have a story, whatever. But one of the things that I would do when I first started, I might say, God is good. And that just gets the crowd, woo! Don't get me wrong, God is good, but I'm trying to think, now you want to call me up here, what am I going to say? But I'm buying time, but see, check it, I'm in the moment. I'm in that moment, live in that moment, live in that space where I engage. So people are, woo, sometimes people just they want that. So maybe I ask a question that's not meant to be answered. Maybe I start with, have you ever really thought about what it would be like if you lived your dreams? And then you jump into what you're gonna say. Because the person's still kind of thinking about maybe their dreams or whatever. You see, so I want to engage. That's the lesson of social media. That's the lesson of, I hate to say it, but I'll say it because it's a point, even though not political, of Donald Trump. Engagement. I think the reason why he won in 2016 and he had and has the following is the understanding of how to engage people. You don't just give a speech. That's what a lot of the other politicians were doing. They gave a speech, they sat out, and at the end of the day, what he did was able to get up there and knew how to rile people up, knew how to, hey, you have fears about this country being taken over by immigrants and Black folk and colored people and Muslims and gay people. Hey, I don't like them either. Let's talk about that. And if you look at it, right, because I think it's something to be said about that, it was a very conversational style. Nobody can look at a Donald Trump and say this is a course in public speaking, as it were, like you would think, but it was effective because it was a conversation. Let's just talk about how stupid the people are that are running this country. People have never heard people say that. So one, you thought, is he really calling the president stupid? So you listen because you want to see that, and then he's just talking, and then you think, So the engagement is, can I just talk to you? It's 30 people in the room, I'm talking. It's 1,000 people, I'm talking. That speech that I showed you, the valedictory, it's 15,000, but I'm talking to each person. I'm talking to you. You're graduating with me. You know what it was like 4 years ago when we looked to the left and the right. You know all the dreams and aspirations. This is our moment. They're watching us. This is me and you's moment. The audience is fine with that because they know that they're immersed in something that's happening that's bigger than everybody else. You see what I mean? That's fine because I'm in that moment. I'm engaging with them. They get it, that this isn't really about them. It's about me with my classmates. What is that for you? If you're standing up to give a toast, or if you're standing up, whatever it is, before you open up to speak, I want you to ask yourself, where can I engage? Where can I engage? Just this weekend, they asked me to go to, so I was at a church. It's the first time I had been to Brooklyn this whole year. And he asked me to stand up and talk about my book. And I didn't do this as a tactic, but I literally saw this young boy and I remember thinking, he looks like me when I was, 20 years ago. And I just started there. Who's that? No, you, who's that? I remember being right there. You see, that's that engagement because that crowd does not know me, but they know him because that's a member of their church. So I've engaged with them. Remember I talked about before that moment when things break? Sometimes it's not so much that you won them over, but you won people over that are around them. Look back at that speech again with the guy talking. With them, especially in high school where people are led by what other people are doing. That's just how people are. Them seeing how he's connecting with their class. Wait a minute, she's crying. That has an effect on you too. So everybody is living in that moment because he's created engagement. He has elicited emotion. And then the speaker has something to say. And I'll end on that point. If you know what it is you want to say, I'm talking about you know what you want to say, Can it fit on a bumper sticker? What do I want them to leave? What's that one thing? If you know what that is, and you focus on a structure, what that structure is, and you talk, forget about yourself, just talk, converse with them, engage with them. What are you trying to say? And enjoy that moment of relaying that. Every time you speak, your words will land. Every single solitary time. Will you still be nervous at times? Yes. But now you're more in control of it. You feel free. You can ask. Who says you can't ask questions in the middle of a, hey, what's your name? And politicians do it all the time. Check out this little thing. How many times do you notice that when a politician is asked a question, generally not from the media, but I mean from the public, what's the first thing that the politician generally does? They get the question, sir, what are you going to do about education? Or ma'am, what are you going to do? I have to stop saying that because women are ruling the world now, because we're about to have a woman president soon. So ma'am, what are you going to do about the economic policy in this country? First thing they do, 9 times out of 10, thank you for that question. What's your name? What's your name? I'm Jody. Are you a teacher? Yeah, you're a teacher. And I guarantee you as a teacher, you see what it's like with your co-pays going up. You see what it's like kids having to come to school and not wear masks. Well, let me talk to you about what I want to do. You see what's happened? That's engagement right there. Just to ask their name, just those little things. What's your name? So even if I'm speaking and it's a bunch of people in the room and it's 1,000 people, I can still stop and ask that person. Comedians do it all the time. In the middle of the show, they'll roast one person. That's called engagement. Because now I'm showing you, I didn't just have this prepared set that I had. I can stop in the middle and I can point out one person. I can stop and say, you right there. When I was in the back in that seat with her, the woman in the red shirt, I was in that seat 5 years ago. Now, everybody turns around to look at the seat. You see those little things? Whenever I get up to speak, I want to say something to get them to say something back or to move. That's a secret to engagement. Don't just start talking. And then at the end of the 15 minutes or 20 minutes, do you have anything you want to say? I'm sitting here like I was on Instagram for the last half. So no, I don't have anything to say now. But if you engage me at the beginning and I feel like I'm a part of this, and now you're telling me about your business, or you're telling me about your mother, or you're telling me about something that happened in your past, you're telling me about where we're going in the future, I'm there with you. All right, so I think I hope that of everything that I've shared, and all of this is going to be on YouTube. You can watch any of this. You can go back and see, because I know I've dropped a lot of stuff. But what do you think?
I actually have a question more than a comment. So in the context, if you were in a context of like a business meeting or a lunch or something like that, and you were trying to engage your audience and your audience was only one person that you didn't know before, but there was a common link, like in terms of like a colleague or something, then what would an advisable question be to start that engagement that isn't too over friendly because you don't know the person, but also to create that engagement where they feel as if they can, be on track with you?
Great question. No pun intended. What question? That's a great question. But I cannot give a one size fits all answer. So this goes to, I don't want you to react. I want you to respond. So little things. I'm interested when I walk in a room, what's around me, particularly if it's their office or if it's their room, because they've created that environment. If I'm on Zoom and I don't think it's weird, I might point something out that's behind them. They wouldn't mind, it's behind them. They put it there unless it's something that seems, there's a line between making small talk and actually being conversational. You never want to be that person that just, okay, we've all done that where, okay, you just, what are we really here for? Like, because the person, oh, how are you doing? You really don't care how I'm doing. But maybe you do. I mean, sometimes you do, but what makes it authentic is ask something that you're genuinely curious about. I guess that's how I ask. So if you're not interested in how they're doing, and I don't mean to sound rude, don't ask it because it sounds weird. So if you walk in the room, oh my goodness, where did you get that from? People like that. That's somewhere that can just start off. And as a matter of fact, I advise people, like in interviews, in some way to point something out. And you got to be careful how you do it. I mean, you know, point out, that's your wife right there? Is that your wife? Oh, wow. That's not what we're, but you know, what I want to point out something because again, that's creating that connection. And maybe it just starts with an engagement. I've done that several times. Oh, I've been there. So I point out, oh, that's neat. They may say something, yeah, I got that when I was in China. And then it's like, yeah, China. I've been to China. You've been to China? And now and that's happened several times because people don't think I went there once in college. Like, wow, most people haven't. So though, remember I told you, it's what happens before the moment. Persuasion, that's before the moment. Before we get kind of down to the business and we're having that real authentic change, make it authentic. So that's my answer. Ask a question you genuinely care about.
Okay, thank you. That's
Sure.
really useful. Yeah.
Yes. Because at the end of the day, and I think this is how you look at it, people are people. People want to feel like, people like what's interesting. Remember we talk about brief, you know, the word I being interesting. Think about an interviewer. An interviewer does how many interviews in a day? They might do 2, they might do 20. Take a person that's listening to your business presentation. You're not the only person that they heard. Take if you're walking into a room and giving a speech, chances are you're not the only one. So your personality, that authenticity, those are the things that really do make a difference, that make you stand out a little bit more than that other person. Being curious and questioning and confident, those are things that come off. Yep. So tips for how to be, I know given, what are some practical things beyond what I've shared that you can do to be better at speaking? One is just start having more conversations with people because that's really all you're doing. Get more comfortable at talking to people, at responding, listening to what they're saying. So we didn't have time to do it, but there's several, one of the things that we could have done as an exercise is I was going to have like you and me and somebody else, we were going to talk to each other for 2 or 3 minutes, but everything we said, we would spell and not say it. And that exercise is done. So instead of saying, I want you to go, I would say IWANTTOGO. I mean, I have to really think about it, but the point is, when you talk that way, you really listen to what the other person is saying. That's a practical practice to help you become a more active listener, because when you're spelling, I really have to listen more. The truth of the matter is, most times we really don't hear what the other person is saying. So that's why we're reacting and not responding. But if I listen and I hear it, now I can respond. So those are little things that a person, you know, like for instance, can do. There's another thing where they talked about, this was interesting, reacting versus responding. And so he tells the audience, he says, and it's a live audience, he says, on the count of 5, you're going to point to things in the room, but give it the wrong name intentionally. So if I'm pointing at this is clearly a book, I'd say cat, or, you know, animal, or pizza. And he's saying, this is what you're going to do. And it seems like weird. What are you having all these people shout these weird things and point different places? And he has people do it. But then he asks, how many people mess up? Because it seems to be the easiest thing, right? How can you mess that up? But what he's showing is, even when you get instructions early, what happens is we get in our own way. So your mind, just like I did, I started with cat and then dog, your mind tries to create patterns, or your mind ahead of it tries to create this scenario rather than just living in the moment. That's what he's trying to get. That's the point of that exercise. And just pointing and saying rather than trying to anticipate it. And that's what happens. So this is the way, that's the story I forgot to tell. I don't want you to think of, and I slipped when I said this, you're not performing. That's what adds part of the stress. If I tell you got to perform tomorrow, that's going to add the stress. You're not performing. You're having a conversation. Again, we're reframing how you look at it. It's not a performance. I don't want you to look at it that way. I really want you to look at it in the sense of, I am having an opportunity to share something, to educate, to enlighten, to inspire. Maybe it's to amuse. I don't know which one it's going to be, but I can do that.
That helps a lot because, you know, being in court, and for the longest time, I did think of that as a performance. It was like you had to get up there and perform for your client.
You don't want to do that. And this is the problem with a performance. In a performance, okay, I'll tell it to you this way. I've worked with people, right, and they've practiced, and I tell you to rehearse your speech. But what I really don't want you to do is I want you to practice your message rather than rehearse the words. But you have people, right, they do that, and then they get up and let's say they miss a line. In their mind, they think, what? I messed up. The audience doesn't know what you were going to say. So, but that's the point. Because we get in our own way and we think perform, we think it's a right or wrong way to do it. Rather than looking at it, there's a myriad of ways I can tell this story. I can tell it loud and animated. I can sit down and maybe, it's many ways. I can use my hands. Maybe I just sit like this. But I am conveying this from a place of authenticity, connection, and credibility. But no, I don't feel the need to perform for you, because then I'm thinking in my mind right or wrong. And then I'm getting in my head and I'm wondering, did I say it right? And I'm subconscious, and that's going to really make me nervous. And then the more I do it, I'm getting even more nervous. The antidote to that is to step back. I'm having a conversation. They could have easily chose anybody else to ask this, but they actually chose me. See how I'm looking at it differently? It's one thing to say, oh my God, why did they pick? Usually we don't use the word chose with speak. They picked me to get up. No, they chose me. The CEO thought I had something to say and nobody else could deliver it. The presenter called me and nobody else. You know, so that's an honor, right? That somebody thinks I have something to say. And it's really not one just way for me to say it. So I don't want to give myself that fear or that anxiety and pressure. But now I am just communicating it because I have the floor. That's the truth of the matter. I have the floor. When you speak, you have the opportunity for people to listen, and you could say something that could change their entire life.